Hi, I'm Ryan CRC. Before the 2020 election, Donald Trump repeatedly claimed that mail-in ballots would lead to widespread voter fraud and steal the election from him. Of course, this accusation was nonsensical, because mail-in ballots are processed and counted the same way as absentee ballots, which Trump and his family trusted enough to use when they voted. Trump claimed they were different because absentee ballots were requested by voters, whereas mail-in ballots were unsolicited and just sent out to everyone by the millions. This difference is inconsequential though, because it does not lead to voter fraud. When a registered voter receives a ballot in the mail, they either fill it out and return it, or they discard it and vote in person. It doesn't matter whether they requested it or not. If someone wanted to commit voter fraud, they could mail in their ballot and then go vote in person, the same exact way they could mail in an absentee ballot and then vote again in person. In either case, the system would flag their second vote and disregard it. Besides, there's no good reason to think voters would mail in ballots for Joe Biden significantly more than they would for Donald Trump. That was the first of many excuses Trump would make for losing the 2020 presidential race. During his January 6th rally, Donald Trump offered so-called evidence to support his conspiracy theory that the 2020 race was stolen from him. Of course, his accusations did not prove the election was rigged against him. All he proved was that he was desperate to blame his loss on everyone and everything except himself. Here are a few examples of the lies Donald Trump told his disciples at the January 6th rally in 2021. Despite what Donald said, 8,000 dead people did not vote in Pennsylvania. The city commissioner of Philadelphia, who is himself a Republican, said there was no evidence that 8 dead people voted in Pennsylvania, much less 8,000. In every election cycle, some states will experience a few cases where ballots have been cast on behalf of the deceased. This usually happens when someone mails in their ballots months before the election takes place, and then they pass away before their vote is received and counted on election day itself. In some cases, the identity of a voter gets confused with the identity of another citizen who has passed away because they share the same name and birth date. In either case, the number of dead voters is very small in every election cycle. And among the handful of dead voters who are discovered, some of them are Republican. A man by the name of Bruce Bartman voted for Donald Trump in Pennsylvania on behalf of himself and his late mother. Donald Hartle voted for his late wife in Nevada, and Tracy McKee voted for her late mother in Arizona. All of them were registered Republicans. So dead people don't always vote Democrat, and thousands of dead people certainly didn't vote for Joe Biden. That was a complete fabrication on the part of Donald Trump. The fact that these Republicans were caught cheating also suggests that the system does work, and it's not so easy to get away with voter fraud. Trump made a big fuss that Pennsylvania counted 205,000 more votes than there were voters. He said that was mathematically impossible, and these votes must have come from someone's imagination. Of course, he couldn't provide any evidence to support his claim. The State Department said this inconsistency probably resulted from the fact that ballots are recorded in one system, whereas voter history is recorded in another system called SURE. If the ballots are counted before the SURE database is updated to reflect the current number of registered voters, then the number of votes will not match the number of voters. But just because the two databases are updated at different times does not in any way mean that there were actually more votes than voters. Trump either didn't understand how data was collected and processed, or he purposely misrepresented the data to promote his fraud narrative. Trump made baseless allegations that Dominion machines, which were used to tabulate ballots, malfunctioned and deleted millions of his votes nationwide. That accusation was proven untrue. There was a county clerk in Michigan who forgot to update the software, and thousands of votes were counted in favor of Biden when they should have gone to Trump. But election officials quickly discovered and corrected the error, once again showing that the election process does work. There was no machine glitch in that county, much less in other machines throughout the country. It's funny how Trump claimed that Dominion machines only miscounted votes in the states that Biden won, and they worked perfectly fine in all the states that Trump himself won. In fact, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, along with the Election Infrastructure Council, called the 2020 election, quote, the most secure in American history, end quote. Donald claimed there were massive voter dumps for Joe Biden overnight, and no one knew where all these ballots came from. Trump would be winning in some states on election night, but then losing in those same states the next morning. What else could explain this phenomenon except voter fraud, right? Let me clear up this mystery for Donald, because that's how counting works. When large batches of ballots come in, they take longer to tally. So one candidate can be winning at the beginning of the count, but then end up losing if more votes come in for the other candidate. Election officials expected large batches of votes to pour in overnight. This was no surprise or mystery to them. And many of these votes favored Donald Trump. They were not all for Joe Biden, as the Trump administration asserted. The bottom line is, Donald Trump could not provide one shred of evidence or one valid argument to support his claims of widespread voter fraud and election tampering, because there was none. Of course, no election is perfect. Election workers make mistakes, just as people do in all areas of life. But those errors are quickly discovered and corrected because election officials take steps to ensure a fair and accurate counting process. Those errors certainly would not account for the 7 million votes that Joe Biden beat Trump by. The system works. Donald's lies about our election process are disturbing, but what's equally disturbing is Trump's hypocrisy on this issue. He said Joe Biden was an illegitimate president, and yet Trump lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton in the first election, which means that Donald Trump was not democratically elected, and therefore he was never the rightful president to begin with. Trump told his supporters in North Carolina to vote twice, once in person and once by mail, to test the effectiveness of the system and make sure that it worked properly. So while Donald Trump ranted and raved about voter fraud, he literally told his followers to commit voter fraud. During his infamous phone call with the Georgia Secretary of State, Trump pressured Brad Raffensperger to change the vote count and find just enough ballots that would allow him to beat Joe Biden. So while Trump cried about election tampering, he actually encouraged a government official to tamper with the election so he could win the state. Trump also encouraged states to stop counting, and he insisted that votes which came in after Election Day would not be added to the final count. Apparently, he didn't know or care that many states have a grace period of several days where they can legally count mail-in votes that arrive after Election Day, as long as those ballots are postmarked by November 3rd. Once again, Trump is trying to rig the election after complaining that the election is rigged. What's even more incredible is that Trump was already losing in those states when he told them to stop counting votes. It would not have helped him to cheat because Joe Biden already had the 270 electoral votes he needed to win the race. In his January 6th speech, Trump encouraged Mike Pence to send electoral votes back to various states where they can be recertified in his favor. Of course, Mike Pence had no authority to do this because his role in the congressional proceedings was more ceremonial than anything else. So in the same rally where Donald Trump lied about election tampering, he told his own vice president to illegally overthrow the election in his favor. The bottom line is, Trump cannot claim that he and his supporters had the constitutional right to protest the government on January 6th, because he had no just cause to do so. Since there was no widespread voter fraud or election tampering, Congress had every legal right to count the electoral votes and confirm Joe Biden as the next president. When Donald Trump instructed his throng of followers to subvert the congressional proceedings in an effort to hold on to his own power, he was inciting insurrection against the United States government and attempting to overturn our democracy. I'm Ryan CRC. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel where you can view similar videos. Also, follow me on social media such as Facebook and Instagram where you can find related content. Until next time, take care.